Hello everyone, today we are going to learn Chapter 3, The Rise of the Marathas, Part 1 from your Social Science textbook. In this video, I'll be covering each and every line from the chapter so you don't miss anything important. Make sure to keep your notebook and pen ready and take notes while watching. This will help you remember the concepts better. You can pause or rewind any time to write things down. So, let's begin. First, we have a quote by Ramchandra Pant Amadhya, Agnyapatra 1715. Ramchandra Pant Amadhya was a minister and advisor in the Maratha Empire who served under Shivaji Maharaj and later under Sambhaji. He wrote a famous administrative treatise called Agnyapatra in 1715 CE, which laid down rules for good governance, administration, and foreign policy. The book shows his wisdom, political understanding, and concern for India's safety from foreign powers. He says, among the merchants, the hat wearers like the Portuguese, the English, the Dutch, the French, and the Danes also conduct trade. But they are not like other merchants. They are fully intent on entering this land, increasing their territory, and propagating their religion. They are obstinate people. The navy and gunpowder are their chief weapons. Their traffic should be controlled and they shouldn't be allowed to build strong buildings. Obstinate means stubborn, someone who doesn't easily change their opinion or decision even if others try to convince them. So here Ramchandra Pant Amadhya is warning about European traders who came to India, such as the Portuguese, English, Dutch, French, and Danes. He points out that these foreigners were not ordinary traders who only wanted to buy and sell goods. Instead, they had hidden motives. They wanted to capture Indian territories, spread their own religion, and use their navy and gunpowder, that is, military strength, to gain power. He suggests that Indian rulers should be careful, control their trade, and not allow them to build forts or strong buildings because that could help them establish political control, which is exactly what happened later during the colonial period. So, this paragraph shows that people like Ramchandra Pant Amadhya already understood that the European traders were not just here for trade but also wanted to take control of land and spread their religion. It shows an early awareness of their plans and the need to protect India's freedom and power. Figure 3.1 Raigad Fort, Maharashtra, with the grand entrance to the palace where Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was crowned in 1674, marking the formal beginning of the Maratha Empire. So here we can see the Raigad Fort in Maharashtra, an important historical place. It was here where Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was crowned as the king in 1674 CE, which officially marked the beginning of the Maratha Empire. The grand entrance you see in the image leads to the royal palace inside the fort. Raigad Fort was not only Shivaji Maharaj's capital but also a symbol of Maratha pride, strength, and independence. So the big questions are, who were the Marathas? How did they manage to become the largest pan-Indian power before the British took over? What were some features of their governance? What impact did the Maratha Empire leave in Indian history? We will find answers for these questions in this chapter. Figure 3.2, this timeline shows the major events in Maratha history, from Shivaji Maharaj's birth in 1630 to the end of Maratha power in 1818. It highlights important moments like his coronation at Raigad, his southern conquest, and the wars with the Mughals and the British. 1630, birth of Shivaji. 1646, beginning of Shivaji's rule. At just 16, he captured his first fort and began his rule. 1657, founding of the Maratha Navy. So in 1657, he built a strong Maratha Navy to protect India's coastline. 1666, imprisonment at and escape from Agra. So in 1666, Shivaji was imprisoned in Agra by Aurangzeb, but he made a daring escape. 1674, Chhatrapati Shivaji's coronation at Raigad. So in 1674, there was a historic coronation at Raigad Fort and Shivaji became Chhatrapati, the sovereign king. 1677, Dakshin Digvijay, conquest of the south. So in 1677, the Dakshin Digvijay, or the conquest of South India, showed the growing power of the Marathas, expanding his empire towards South India. 1680, death of Shivaji. 1682 to 1707, Mughal Maratha Wars. The Marathas fought a long war with the Mughals, proving their strength and resilience. 1754, beginning of Maratha control over Delhi. The Marathas gained control over Delhi, became powerful enough to influence Delhi and the Mughals, showing their dominance in India. 1761, Battle of Panipat, Maratha defeat. So in 1761, the Battle of Panipat was a tough defeat for the Marathas. 1775 to 1782, First Anglo-Maratha War, Maratha victory. So between 1775 and 1782, the Marathas fought against the British and won. 1818, Third Anglo-Maratha War, end of Maratha power. So in 1818, Third Anglo-Maratha War was fought. The British finally defeated the Marathas, marking the end of Maratha power and the beginning of British rule in India. Who are the Marathas? The Marathas are a group of people native to the Deccan Plateau, more specifically present-day Maharashtra. They are identified with the language they speak, Marathi, which has had a rich and continuous literary history since the 12th century. In this chapter, we will see them rise as a powerful political entity that will alter the course of India's history. Literary history, the historical development of writings in prose or poetry in a particular language. So, the literary history means story or development of literature. That is, how writings like poems, stories and plays have changed and grown over time in a particular language or region. For example, the literary history of India includes ancient texts like Vedas and Ramayana, medieval poetry by Kabir and Tulsidas, and modern writings in many Indian languages. So in short, literary history tells us how people's ideas, emotions and creativity were expressed through writing over time. So the Marathas are the people who come from the Deccan Plateau, mainly in today's Maharashtra. They speak the Marathi language, which has had a long and rich history of literature since the 12th century. In this chapter, you will learn how the Marathas became a strong political power that played an important role in changing India's history. During the 13th century, most of Maharashtra were ruled by the Yadava dynasty, with Devagiri, present-day Daulatabad, as its capital. In the early 14th century, the Yadava dynasty was overcome by the Khilji Sultanate from Delhi. So in the 13th century, most of Maharashtra was ruled by the Yadava dynasty, whose capital was Devagiri. Today it is called Daulatabad. But in the early 14th century, the Khilji rulers from Delhi defeated the Yadavas and took control of the region. Figure 3.3, Sant Ramdas. Sant Ramdas was a respected saint, philosopher and spiritual teacher from Maharashtra. He was a contemporary of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj and inspired him with his teachings on dharma, that is righteousness, discipline and service to the people. Sant Ramdas promoted physical fitness, unity and devotion to Lord Rama. And his ideas helped shape the moral and spiritual foundation of the Maratha Empire. Figure 3.4, postal stamp showing Sant Tukaram. Sant Tukaram was one of the most beloved saints of Maharashtra. Amidst such political changes, the cultural traditions continued, particularly those related to bhakti, devotion to the divine or a particular deity. Between the 7th and the 17th centuries, for spiritual upliftment, saints and seekers from several parts of India preferred the path of bhakti to merely external ritualism. So during this time of many political changes, the cultural and spiritual life of people continued strongly. One important tradition was bhakti, which means deep devotion to God. From the 7th to the 17th century, many saints and devotees across India chose the path of bhakti, that is loving and serving God with faith and sincerity, instead of just performing rituals or ceremonies. They believed true spirituality came from the heart and devotion, not just from following rules. These saints, coming from diverse sections of society, composed devotional songs and poetry in the languages of the masses, which allowed their messages to travel far and wide. So these saints came from different social backgrounds, both rich and poor. They wrote devotional songs and poems in the local languages that ordinary people spoke and understood. Because of this, their teachings of love, faith, and equality spread to many places and people. Let's explore. Have you ever heard the term Bhakti? What does it mean to you? Choose a Bhakti saint from any part of India and learn about their life, their teachings, and the message they shared. You can also find one of their poems or bhajans and share it with your classmates. So, what is the meaning of Bhakti? The term Bhakti means devotion or deep love for God. It is about feeling close to God through faith, prayer, and good actions rather than through big rituals or sacrifices. So you need to choose one Bhakti saint like Saint Kabir, Mirabai, Tulsidas, Guru Nanak, Namdev or Tukaram and find out where they lived, what they taught, what message they gave to the people and share one of their poems or bhajans with the class. I will give you a sample answer for reference. You can write your own answer based on this example. Mirabai. Mirabai was a Rajput princess and a famous Bhakti poet from Rajasthan. She was deeply devoted to Lord Krishna. Teachings: she taught that love and faith in God are greater than social rules or power. Message: Mirabai showed that devotion can give courage and freedom to follow one's heart. Famous bhajan: Payaji Mene Ram Ratan Dhan Payo. Meaning, I have found the priceless treasure of God's name. In Maharashtra, many saints like Dhyaneshwar, Namdev, Tukaram, Ramdas, etc. gained popularity at this time. They helped translate important texts like Upanishads and Bhagavad Gita into Marathi, making their philosophy accessible to the people. Some also focused on social organization and political awareness, similar to the Sikh gurus. As a result, the society acquired a solid cultural foundation which later helped the Marathas to organize themselves into a political power. So during this time in Maharashtra, many great saints such as Dhyaneshwar, Namdev, Tukaram and Ramdas became very popular. These saints wanted everyone to understand spiritual teachings. So they translated important holy books like the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita into Marathi. Because of their efforts, people could now understand deep ideas about life and faith in their own language. Some saints also worked to bring people together and help them think about society and politics, much like the Sikh gurus in North India. All these teachings gave the people of Maharashtra a strong cultural and moral base, which later helped the Marathas unite and grow into a powerful kingdom under leaders like Shivaji Maharaj. By the 17th century, some Maratha chiefs made early attempts at establishing sovereignty, but they proved unsuccessful until Shivaji rose to power and brought the Marathas together. But who was Shivaji? So by the 17th century, a few Maratha chiefs tried to form their own independent rule, free from the control of large empires. However, their efforts failed because they lacked unity and strong leadership. That changed when Shivaji appeared on the scene. He was a brave and visionary leader who united the Marathas, inspired them with a sense of pride, and successfully laid the foundation for a powerful Maratha empire. Foundation of Maratha power and the rise of Shivaji. In 1630, Shivaji was born in the Bhosle clan to Shahaji and Jijabai. At the time, Shahaji served the Deccan Sultanates and was often away from his family. Meanwhile, in his Jagir at Pune, Shivaji grew up under the watchful eyes of Jijabai and some trusted officials, receiving values and a good education. At this time, the Pune region was deeply affected by constant infighting between the Deccan Sultans, whom the Marathas served, which caused much hardship for the common people. Jagir. A Jagir was a piece of land given by a king or ruler to someone, usually a noble or soldier, as a reward for their service. The person who got the Jagir could collect taxes from the land and use the money to take care of their needs or help the king when needed. So, in earlier times, kings used to give a piece of land to their loyal soldiers or important officers as a reward for their service. This land was called a Jagir, and the person who received it was known as Jagirdar. The Jagirdar didn't actually own the land, but he had the right to collect taxes from the people living there. He could use that money to meet his needs or to support the king whenever required, like during wars or emergencies. So, a Jagir was both a reward and a responsibility. The king rewarded someone for their good service, and in return, that person helped the kingdom when needed. In 1630, Shivaji was born into the Bhonsle family. His parents were Shaji and Jijabad. At that time, his father Shaji was working for the Deccan Sultanates, the small kingdoms in southern India. So he was often away from home. Shivaji grew up in his father's Jagir at Pune, where his mother Jijabai and some trusted officials took care of him. They gave him strong values, good education, and a sense of duty toward his people. But life in Pune was not peaceful. There were constant fights between the Deccan Sultans, which made it very hard for ordinary people to live safely and happily. These troubles made young Shivaji understand how important it was to bring peace and good rule to his land. Figure 3.5, a painting of Shivaji made in the 1680s British Museum. So this is a historical painting of Shivaji from the 1680s. It is kept in the British Museum. Since the painting was made during or close to Shivaji's lifetime, it helps historians understand how he looked and how rulers were portrayed in that period. When he was just 16, Shivaji launched military campaigns, first consolidating his hold over the Pune region by capturing neglected and unoccupied forts and strengthening their defenses. His vision of a sovereign kingdom or Swarajya grew over the years, extending to political, economic and cultural aspects, which we will explore in this chapter. So, Shivaji was just 16 years old when he began leading military campaigns. His first goal was to take control of the Pune region. He did this by capturing forts that were neglected or without soldiers and strengthening the forts he captured so they could not be attacked easily. As he grew older, Shivaji's idea of creating a sovereign kingdom known as Swarajya, that is self-rule, also became bigger and clearer. His dream was not only about winning battles, it also included political goals, that is running the government independently, economic goals, improving trade, money and administration, and cultural goals, that is protecting local traditions, people and language. These different aspects of Swarajya will be discussed in this chapter. Figure 3.6, the Sindhudurg fort near the Maharashtra-Goa border is one of the several naval fortifications built by the Marathas. So this is a picture of a Sindhudurg fort located near the Maharashtra-Goa border on the Arabian Sea. It is one of the many naval forts built by the Marathas during Shivaji's reign. Shivaji's kingdom soon expanded to India's west coast, and to secure access to the resources of coastal regions, he felt the need to establish a navy. This was a truly revolutionary step at the time. By comparison, the Bijapur Sultanate, ruled by the Adil Shahi dynasty, maintained merchant ships but did not possess a full-time naval force which could protect the coast. Even the Mughal Empire's use of a navy was very limited. Thus, the Maratha Navy was born, whose exploits became legendary. So, Shivaji's kingdom grew and reached the west coast of India. To use the resources of the coastal areas and to protect them, Shivaji understood that he needed a navy. At that time, this was a new and smart idea. The Bijapur Sultanate only had merchant ships for trade. They did not have a proper navy to guard their coastline. The Mughal Empire also used ships very little. So, Shivaji created the Maratha Navy, which later became very famous for its bravery and strength. To protect his people from powerful enemies, Shivaji had recourse to the tactic of guerrilla warfare, which uses small groups of people in a focused way with speed, surprise and knowledge of the terrain to defeat bigger armies. His successors soon invited the wrath of the Bijapur Sultanate, which sent the veteran general Afzal Khan to confront him. Shivaji and his advisors managed to convince Afzal Khan to meet him for a one-on-one meeting at the foot of the Pratapgarh fort amid thick forest. There, Shivaji killed Afzal Khan, and the Marathas, hidden in the mountains, routed the Khan's army with guerrilla attacks. So, to protect his people from strong enemies, Shivaji used guerrilla warfare. This means fighting with small groups using speed, surprise, and good knowledge of the mountains and forests. These small groups could defeat much bigger armies. Shivaji's growing power made the Bijapur Sultanate angry. They sent their famous general Afzal Khan to fight him. Shivaji and his advisors made Afzal Khan agree to a private meeting near Pratapgarh Fort, inside a thick forest. During this meeting, Shivaji killed Afzal Khan. After that, Maratha soldiers were hiding in the hills, attacked Afzal Khan's army using guerrilla tactics and defeated them. Think about it. If you could time travel and meet Shivaji, what 3 questions would you ask him and why? Imagine you could travel back in time and meet Shivaji Maharaj. What 3 questions would you ask him and why would you choose those questions? Think about his leadership, his bravery, his battles, and his idea of Swarajya and choose 3 questions. Don't miss out. The Vagnak is a small weapon shaped like a tiger's claw which Shivaji used to kill Afzal Khan in close combat. Figure 3.7, Vagnak or the tiger's claw. The Vagnak is a small weapon that looks like a tiger's claw. Shivaji Maharaj used this weapon when he met Afzal Khan. During their close meeting, Shivaji used the Vagnak to kill Afzal Khan in hand-to-hand combat. The sharp claws helped him attack quickly and protect himself. Let's explore. Try to find out more about guerrilla warfare. Which other countries in the world adopted this method? What geographical advantages did they utilize for this? Discuss your findings in groups. So you need to learn more about guerrilla warfare. You already know that Shivaji used this method to fight bigger enemies. Now find out which other countries in the world also used guerrilla warfare. Some countries used it in wars and some used it to fight for freedom. You need to write which country used it, who were they fighting, what natural features helped them, that is mountains, forests, caves, jungles. These natural places help fighters hide, move quickly and surprise the enemy. After you collect the information, sit in your groups and discuss what you found. Talk about why guerrilla warfare helped small groups and how geography made a big difference. This activity will help you understand how landforms and environment are important in battles. Soon afterwards, the Mughal nobleman Shaista Khan invaded Shivaji's territories with a big army for 3 years. Finally, with only a few soldiers, Shivaji raided Shaista Khan's camp at night. The Khan barely escaped from the raid, losing a few fingers, and promptly left Maharashtra. This daring raid resembles the modern-day surgical strike. Surgical strike, a military attack intended to damage only a specific target with no or minimal damage to other people or infrastructure. So, a surgical strike is a type of military attack where the army aims at only one specific target. The goal is to destroy that target while causing no harm or very little harm to other people, buildings or places nearby. It is called surgical because it is done with precision, just like a surgeon works carefully without hurting anything else. So after some time, the Mughal noble Shaista Khan attacked Shivaji's lands with a very large army and stayed there for almost 3 years. Shivaji could not fight such a big army directly, so he planned a secret night raid with only a small group of soldiers. Later at night, Shivaji and his men entered Shaista Khan's camp quietly and attacked suddenly. Shaista Khan was shocked and tried to escape. He lost a few fingers while running away. After the frightening attack, he left Maharashtra immediately. This bold night raid is similar to a modern-day surgical strike because a specific target was attacked, only a few soldiers were used, it caused minimal damage to others, and it was done with speed, planning and precision. As a retaliatory action for the 3-year-long wave of attacks, Shivaji sacked Surat, a wealthy port city of the Mughal Empire in present-day Gujarat. There he obtained enormous treasure worth almost 1 crore of rupees, an extremely large sum for the time. So for 3 years, the Mughals kept attacking Shivaji's territories again and again, right? To take revenge, Shivaji attacked Surat, which was a very rich port city of the Mughal Empire, today in Gujarat. When Shivaji's forces sacked Surat, they collected a huge amount of treasure, almost 1 crore rupees, which was an extremely big amount in those days. In history, when we say a city was sacked, it means the city was attacked and the soldiers took away money, treasure and valuable goods. It is a history word used for looting a place during a war or raid. So, Shivaji sacked Surat means he attacked the city, collected wealth and treasure but did not destroy temples or harm innocent people. However, he was careful not to attack religious places and even spared the house of Mohandas Parekh, a charitable man. He sacked Surat again after a few years. These events became so famous that they appeared in the London Gazette, an English newspaper of the time, which conveyed how Shivaji wrote to all European diplomatic agents in Surat demanding immediate presence of money, failing which he would return and ruin that city. So even though Shivaji sacked Surat, he was careful and disciplined. He did not attack any religious places and he even spared the house of Mohandas Parekh, a man known for helping the poor. A few years later, Shivaji attacked Surat again. These raids became so well known that they were reported in the London Gazette, an English newspaper of that time. The newspaper wrote that Shivaji had sent letters to European officials living in Surat. In his letters, he demanded money immediately and warned that if they refused, he would come back and destroy the city. This shows that Shivaji's actions were noticed even in Europe, and people there were aware of his power. The sacking of Surat was a great insult to the might and prestige of the Mughal Empire. Therefore, Aurangzeb sent Jai Singh, a distinguished Rajput general, to defeat Shivaji. Against him, Shivaji had to concede defeat at Purandar Fort near Pune and enter into a treaty. He had to give up a sizable part of his kingdom and his son Sambhaji had to enter Mughal service. So, the attack on Surat was a big insult to the Mughal Empire. Surat was one of their richest cities, so when Shivaji sacked it, Emperor Aurangzeb became very angry. To punish Shivaji, Aurangzeb sent Jai Singh, a famous and powerful Rajput general, to fight him. Jai Singh's army was very strong and Shivaji could not win against him. So, at Purandar Fort near Pune, Shivaji was forced to accept defeat and sign a treaty. According to this treaty, Shivaji had to give up a large part of his kingdom and his son Sambhaji had to join the Mughal service. Shivaji was persuaded by Jai Singh to visit the Mughal court at Agra, where he was made to stand before Aurangzeb and the Mughal general whom he had defeated earlier. Incensed at this insult, Shivaji stormed out of the court, following which Aurangzeb put him under house arrest. To escape this, Shivaji devised a strategy. He started distributing gifts to holy men and Mughal generals. So Jai Singh convinced Shivaji to visit the Mughal court at Agra. But when Shivaji arrived there, he was insulted. Aurangzeb made him stand before a Mughal general whom Shivaji had already defeated in battle. This was very disrespectful, which made Shivaji angry and he walked out of the court. Aurangzeb did not like this and ordered that Shivaji to be kept under house arrest. To escape, Shivaji came up with a clever plan. He began sending gifts to holy men and Mughal officers. The gifts often contained fruits and sweets packed in big baskets. The guards initially checked them, but soon stopped doing so. Expecting this, Shivaji and his son Sambhaji hid themselves in the baskets and made their escape. Aurangzeb could never capture Shivaji again. So the gifts were large baskets filled with fruits and sweets. At first, the guards checked the baskets carefully, but after a few days, they stopped checking them because they thought that they only contained food. Shivaji had expected this. One day, he and his son Sambhaji hid inside the baskets. Since the guards did not inspect them, the baskets were carried out of the house and they escaped safely. After this escape, Aurangzeb was never able to capture Shivaji again. Figure 3.8, a court scene with Shivaji on his throne receiving visitors. Panel in Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Park, Mumbai. So this figure shows a court scene where Shivaji Maharaj is sitting on his throne and receiving important visitors. This artwork is a panel located in Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Park in Mumbai. A few years later, in 1674, Shivaji was coronated with full Vedic rites at the strong mountain fortress of Raigad. His formal title after the coronation was Sri Raja Shiva Chhatrapati. And like some past rulers, he started his own era, the Rajabhisheka Shaka. So, a few years later, in 1674, Shivaji was officially crowned as a king of Raigad Fort, which was a strong and important mountain fort. His coronation ceremony was done with full Vedic rituals, just like in ancient Indian traditions. After becoming king, he took the official title Sri Raja Shiva Chhatrapati. Like some earlier kings in history, he also started his own new calendar era called the Rajabhisheka Shaka, which began from the year of his coronation. After this, Shivaji embarked upon a conquest of the south, also referred to as the Dakshin Digvijay, which included the important and then ill-defended region of present-day northern Tamil Nadu and parts of Karnataka. See map in figure 3.9. This southern extension later gave the Marathas great strategic depth against the Mughal invasion. So after his coronation, Shivaji began conquering areas in the south. This campaign was called Dakshin Digvijay, meaning victory in the southern direction. He captured important regions that today are in northern Tamil Nadu and parts of Karnataka. At that time, these places were not very well protected, so it was easier for him to take control. These southern territories were very important because they gave the Marathas more space and strength to fight against the Mughal invasion. Figure 3.9, Shivaji's kingdom about 1680. Ekoji's role is explained later in the chapter. So this map shows how Shivaji Maharaj's kingdom looked like around the year 1680. It also mentions Ekoji, that is Shivaji's half-brother, whose role will be explained later in the chapter. In the map, orange color shows the territory ruled by Shivaji Maharaj. These are the lands directly ruled and controlled by Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. They usually include Konkan region along the west coast, Pune region, hill forts like Raigad and Pratapgarh, parts of present-day Maharashtra, hill fort Kopal in Karnataka, coastal forts like Vijaydurg and Sindhudurg, ports like Dabol, Rajapur, Malwan and Vengurla, North Tamil Nadu and parts of Karnataka, which included hill fort like Jinji and land fort like Velur. These territories show how Shivaji expanded from local Pune forts to a large and powerful kingdom. Ash or grey color shows the territory controlled by Ekoji. Ekoji, Shivaji's half-brother, established Maratha rule in Tanjavur region in the south. Ekoji did not rule under Shivaji. His rule was separate. That's why the map shows his region differently, to show that the Maratha influence had spread into the deep south, even though it was not under Shivaji's direct control. Yellow color shows the areas ruled by foreign powers. These include Goa and Puducherry also. Don't miss out. While in the south, Shivaji forbade the Dutch from trading slaves. At the time, most Europeans were capturing and selling Indians as slaves and encountered no opposition from Indian powers until Shivaji intervened. His stance on this abuse showed his deep concern for his subjects. So while Shivaji was in the south, he stopped the Dutch traders from buying and selling slaves. At that time, many European powers were capturing Indians and selling them as slaves. And no Indian ruler had strongly opposed this, but Shivaji did. He didn't allow the Dutch to control this cruel trade. This action showed that Shivaji truly cared about the safety and dignity of his people and wanted to protect them from injustice. A fever claimed Shivaji's life when he was 50. He was a master strategist and true visionary, and within his lifetime, his exploits had become legendary across India and beyond. The Europeans compared him with ancient generals like Alexander, and the Bundaila prince Chhatrasal was so inspired by Shivaji's struggle against the Mughals that he managed to create an independent kingdom of Bundelkhand divided between present-day Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. The famous Hindi poet Bhushan specifically came to Maharashtra to meet Shivaji and composed poems in his praise, some of which remain famous to this day. So Shivaji died at the age of 50 because of a fever. Even during his lifetime, he became famous all over India and even outside the country. People admired him because he was a brilliant planner, a strong leader, and a visionary who thought far ahead. European writers compared him with great ancient generals like Alexander the Great. In North India, the Bundela prince Chhatrasal was deeply inspired by Shivaji's courage and his fight against the Mughals. Because of this inspiration, Chhatrasal also fought for freedom and created his own independent kingdom of Bundelkhand in present-day Uttar Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh. The famous Hindi poet Bhushan came all the way to Maharashtra just to meet Shivaji. He wrote several poems in Shivaji's praise, and many of those poems are still well known today. Let's explore. Pick an event from Shivaji's life and with your classmates, stage it as a play. So you need to choose any one important event from Shivaji Maharaj's life and present it as a short play or drama with your classmates. You need to think about which event is interesting and easy to perform, which characters will be needed, what dialogues they might say, what simple props you can use like shawl, fake sword, a basket, etc. Your aim is to show the main idea of the event clearly, what happened, why it happened, and why it was important. You don't need any expensive costume, just act out the scene in a simple and creative way. You can choose the event like Escape from Agra, which is dramatic, suspenseful, and teaches us about Shivaji's intelligence and courage. So with this, we have completed the part 1 of the chapter, The Rise of the Marathas. I hope you found it easy to understand. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching. We will see you again in our next video. Bye-bye.